قول میدی؟ هرمن فقط یه خرچنگه. میدونی خرچنگ فقط یه سخت پوسته که یه صدف پشتشه و کلی پا داره که رو زمین را میره و به درد من نمیخوره. اون نمیتونه تو ساختن قلعه بهمون کمک کنه. اینو بفهم.
Hi, Moshtaba. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It's so nice to see your work. Thank you so much for submitting it. It looks amazing. I can't believe you did this in 32 hours, you said, from scratch to the polished version in your spare time. I think it looks amazing. It's super fun, and I have so much to talk about, but I see you have some questions here, so I just wanted to touch on those briefly before we look at your animation together. You asked what would be advice to get your animation skills to the next level and get hired. Would this piece of animation attract recruiters? What points turn a shot into an amazing one? What does my experience tell me about the years working in the top level industries? What would I do if I was back to the day starting my job? And what are the main points to turn our references into cartoony style? So I'm going to try to answer these kind of in a combination and as succinctly as possible. So I think your animation skills are terrific. I think there's always room for all of us to improve all the time. I think that a piece like this is definitely attractive to recruiters, especially depending on where you're looking to work. This is definitely on the more zany, cartoony side of things. So I would say something that you could do would be to couple this next to something that's kind of a more subtle, like a genuine acting piece. I know this has something that I would recommend is this is super fun and it's like really cool. All of the choices that you've made and all of the like the fun pantomime stuff that you're doing. You're doing it for like almost everything the character is saying, and I would say it like totally works for this. And I think that if you were to do a future shot, I wouldn't go changing this too much to accommodate what I'm saying now. But I think if you're choosing to do something that's a counterpart to this and a good supplement to it, that you could take the approach of doing just something a little bit more subtle and reserved. And, you asked about turning our references into a cartoony style. I think something to always remember is to make sure that even if we're making something really cartoony, it still feels genuine to our reference. So even though we're pushing poses from our reference and taking key moments out of our reference that are fun and we might not have necessarily thought of if we didn't do reference, I think keeping things like genuine and like really feeling like there's an intent behind what the character is doing, rather than trying to find some kind of business for every line or every accent that the character's saying. Really look at your reference for when you're punctuating different lines and when you're thinking and looking around and gesturing. And I think doing something a little bit more on the reserve side would be a good complement to what you have here, which is like very like exciting, and you have an idea for every line, which is really fun to see, and the cartoony style is really fun. But I think we can always find ways to still incorporate some more genuine intent into our animation and our acting, and turning a shot from something, even if it's cartoony, from something regular into something amazing. I think you always want to remember that the audience is looking to connect with the character and find the intent behind what they're saying. And there's some body mechanics in here that, even though it's really cartoony, I think you clearly know fundamentals of animation very well. You have lots of like awesome drag in here, and your squash and stretch is amazing. I think there's some offsets that could be added, and also I think some arcs are missing in here a little bit, especially in the hips. And I know you said you did this so fast, so it's I apologize if this is all stuff you already know, and I'm going to be telling things that you already know, but I think it's always worth going back and looking at work and going over some of that stuff. So let's look at it together. And if I missed any of these questions, I'll try to get to them as I'm talking through. But I don't want to miss the time to go over your animation. So let's take a look together at this here. Okay, so I think one of the main things that I wanted to talk to you about that I'm seeing here that I'm noticing are the arcs that you have in the hips. I feel like could use a little bit of love. So I'm seeing a lot of like starting and stopping and like straight bouncing up and down and left to right. But I think there's some areas where we could afford to have a little bit more arc down, back up, and settle in. And it doesn't have to be like super exaggerated. And it can be small because I know you're trying to make parts of the body still so that we focus on the rest of what you're doing here. So I know there's parts where you have the body very still so that we can focus on the face. And I think that's really cool. I just think there's some areas where we can still add even very tiny little arcs and things that I think they're missing, mostly in the hips. But let's take a look together. I'll turn the markings off for now so we can look at it without them.
هرمن فقط یه خرچنگه. میدونی خرچنگ فقط یه سخت پوسته که صدف پشتشه و کلی پا داره که رو زمین راه میره و به درد من نمیخوره. اون نمیتونه تو ساختن قلعه بهمون کمک کنه. اینو بفهم.
Okay, this is so fun.
هرمن فقط یه خرچنگه.
So, okay, I think I can just go through some examples of them, and then you can always go through and take a look more on your own. And I made some notes on here for some areas. So this here, look at the hips in here. It's a bit like straight up and down in here. There's not a lot of left to right in here. So I think somewhere in here, like consider having this like arc this way up into your next thing like that. And this is an exaggerated drawing, but just instead of straight down, I think you can come around and down and up. So you have an arc in here and then it stops really suddenly. The whole body stops here. So I think you want to continue the body around, up, and down to have this settle. So this is the right idea here. And then it all stops. The whole body stops. So if you put this arc in the hips, then there's some room there for the rest of the body to like settle after that. Rather than, see, it's kind of all of this spacing in here. If you look at this shape here that the body and the arm are making, it's all kind of staying the same in these few frames. The whole body is traveling together here. The torso, the legs, the arms, and then they stop. So if you have this little arc in the hips and the settle, then you can, what would follow is that then there's a little bit of that overlap and settle in the arm as well. So this isn't all completely still. And it can be really small because I know that you're trying to, I think what you're trying to do is to keep certain parts of the body more still so that we can focus on the face, which is looking really great. So that's just one area of that in here. Let's see. Something like this here. These go by really fast. You're asking what, like, what takes a shot to the next level. Framing through some of our mouth shapes can do that. So something in here, I don't know if this rig has the ability to do that, but if you can translate the teeth down a little bit so we don't see this gum here. This is supposed to be an ooh here, I think, based on what he's saying. And if you can put a little bend in the teeth, I see some other area, like to me, it looks like you put a bend in the teeth here. So it looks to me like the rig can do it. So if you can bend the teeth here and just move them down so we get the clear shape of the mouth shape, you can frame through your whole shot. I would say what takes a shot to the next level is like framing through the whole thing when you're at this polished level, which you clearly are with this shot. And looking for areas that things aren't reading completely clearly. So that's one there. This, I don't know, that's just like a little messy piece of the rig there, but you can always look at what's causing that. Okay, I think this might be another, no, we talked about that one. Okay, Here's another spot where the arms kind of stop and freeze. On here, like the hands continue to fold down and the arms have completely stopped. I think you might just need a tiny bit of a cushion in there so that they're not like stopping dead on a frame, that they're still moving a little bit as the hands move down. And then here, the whole body's kind of moving up together. So if the arms continue down, even really subtly for a couple frames, then they won't be like stopping and then the whole body moving up at the same time here. So it just is like that. Even though it's cartoony, if you get that little extra bit of organic, correct body mechanics in there, I would say, it just adds a little bit more of a real feeling to it, even though you're going for a cartoony look here. And here I know everything's still because the head starts to move first. Here, the hips are very straight up and down in here too, and they just kind of stop. So when the hips come up here, and again, this is my suggestion for how I would approach this, even though it's cartoony, is when the hips come up, instead of just completely stopping, have them come up and do like the tiniest little settle down and around and up here, just so everything's not completely stopped. Here's another area where, okay, so the hips look like they're also stopped here, but then they come like kind of in a diagonal to the right and then drop down here and then pop back up. So just keep an eye on this in here. Like it's probably going to be something more like that. So kind of like a down and up like this, rather than right now they're kind of angular and down and up. And then again here, like the whole body's kind of moving up together. This is cool here, how you have the hips coming out and kind of arcing around like that. So that's working really well. I like that you have this moment of, because you have so many things offset throughout, I like that you have this moment where the hands are doing the same thing. I don't know if you want to add like a little bit of an offset in here, just because they hit exactly at the same spot and they're at this exact same angle. So, you know, I know that like sometimes twinning is an okay exception. It's almost exactly the same, even like all the shape of the hands and the thumbs and everything, and the way that they settle on the same frame like that. So even if you vary up like the angle of the hand slightly or the settle slightly or the path that they take to get there, I think it's nice that they like hit on the same frame, but you might just want to vary up like very slightly, either the way that they get there or the way that they settle. Here again, you can see like the whole body starts to move at once. Everything's still and then everything moves at once. So maybe consider adding some offsets in here. This might be another area where I said that. Let's see. Everything I said in this note here, everything is kind of settling back up at the same rate. So even if everything is settling, if it's settling all with the same spacing, it looks a little bit less organic and less appealing. All these smear frames are really cool. Let's see. Some of these in-betweens in here, I don't know if you want to like mess with some of this bend, just so this isn't quite as angular in here, just to like give this whole thing this this like curved line that you're already doing there. I don't know what the capacity of the rig is, but so I can see that you're going from like rounded arms into bent arms, which is tough. So if there's like a place that you kind of have to figure out where the best transition is for that, then I get that. But I think some of the things in here could afford to be a little bit more rounded. I wonder if you're if the bends that you have in there are going from transitioning like linearly from bent shape to angular shape. So I might just try to disguise that a little bit more within this move rather than seeing some of these in-betweens have some angles in them still. I think these can still be rounded. Let's see. Here's another spot where I just thought the teeth kind of flat. This brown, his gums down here, that kind of flashes across the screen. So I feel like I notice it sometimes when he's moving across like that. We see all that like this dark area down here. So I think it would just help to translate the teeth down, and so we don't see as much gums there. And if you can round them to match the shape of the mouth there, I think that would look nice. Let's see. Oh, this area here, it looks like there's some like floating of the hips and the legs in here. I'm not quite sure what's happening under the frame here, but that's just something to reconsider there. Either if he's taking a step back, it's hard to tell that he's taking a step back. But anytime you have a body part that's, it's like his center of gravity and it's moving independently of the rest of his body, I think that's just like throwing me off a little bit in here. So if it's that his hips are delayed coming back under him, I think it can just happen faster. I think this is a little too slow and floaty in here. Let's see what else. You've got a little bit of like slow drift in the fingers, and it's just kind of happening all together here. So that's something it just is standing out because he's otherwise still, and the fingers just look like they have a key that they're drifting on. And they're all kind of doing it at the same time together. So I would either settle them sooner or, at least not have them all do it at the same rate at the same time. Here's another area where in the hips, it looks like he's dropping. If you're like tracking his hips for an arc, they're coming back up like this and then dropping straight down. So maybe you just want like a little bit more of something like that in there. And again, here, when they come up, I think they can settle up and around and down like that. And I'm exaggerating that. You don't need to do it that much, but I think you could do a whole pass on like just the hips and turn on like a motion trail. If you use like Anim, they have the arc tool, and I know there's tools that Maya comes with too, but I would just track and make sure that even if they're really small, that the hips are moving in arcs. Again, here's one where like the hips are moving like straight across back and forth. You might just want like a little dip in the middle there. And then here's a part where like his hips and legs are all moving together here. So I think, I don't know what's happening below frame. I don't know if you have steps in there. But it looks like he's just kind of like bouncing, and that his legs aren't really affecting the rotation of his hips. So if one of his legs is taking more of the weight, we would see some kind of rotation in the hips in here. And right now they're like all kind of still, like if we look at it to camera, we see these lines here. This is why it's extra noticeable on this character, because we see these lines and they're not like twisting this way or this way. So it's like extra noticeable. I think this is really cool here, what you're doing with this finger leading everything. I think that's really creative. It's a really like different way to start that movement, which I think is really fun. So again, you're talking about ways to plus your animation. I think that's things like that are like perfect in a cartoony thing like this. Okay, let's see. Here's an area here where the body's all kind of moving as one piece together. So I might add some offsets in here. And again, like we can see all the rotations of this are like staying the same throughout. So it looks like he's just kind of moving, kind of like on a stick all together like that. So I think, and And then again, like he moves kind of straight up, and I see there's a cushion and a settle at the end into the up position, but I think he's moving enough of a distance up where he would kind of need to settle back down, and then you could have a little bit of overlap and delay in the chest and the head in here, rather than the whole body kind of moves together here and then stays there. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, that's what I'm saying here, that the body kind of hits this pose all together and then stops. Here, it looks, I notice that this hand is really still as the body's moving underneath it, probably because it's like touching his head here. So if he's, doing this and his head is moving, it's odd to me that his hand is so still. I think it would need to like move with his head if he's saying, you understand? So that's just something to keep in mind, that it's extra noticeable that this hand is still because it's touching his head here and his head is moving. This is an in-between that I think just could use a nicer shape. It's really foreshortened to camera. And it's a big jump from here to here to here. So I think either bias this, first of all, I think this arc here, if we like trace this, we can't really, we like lose it in here and then it comes back out. Let me turn ghosting on. So it kind of comes in here. So I think you could do like here, here, here. I think this can come out a little bit. The wrist can be out like this. And I wouldn't have this arm be completely straight like that. I would make sure that you pull the elbow down a little bit. Or start pushing it up, either way, but I would bias it away from being like completely foreshortened to camera like that. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Here's another spot too where the body is really straight up and down in here. So you might just want to put a little bit of an arc in there. And then as this leg comes up, again, this might be breaking because that's just the way the rig is, or I don't know if you can rotate the hips up to kind of support this leg coming up so high. I feel like the hips would rotate up here. And then again, I feel like the hips would rotate forward here to support this leg moving forward. It looks like just we could add a little bit of rotation into the hips in here so that this, his like, lower torso, hips, and legs are sometimes moving as like one unit. And I think we just need to be aware that like there still would be rotation in the hips here, even though this is cartoony. Okay. Oh, this note here is just, so because he was bending down, I would assume that this leg is bent underneath frame and this leg is coming up off the ground while this leg is still bent. So just make sure to wait till he's completely supported on this leg to bring this leg up over here. Okay. So the whole body is also moving together here, like left to right. I don't know if you want to add a little bit of drag or movement in the arms so that this isn't all moving together. And yeah, I think that was my last note on there. Okay, so again, I think this looks really awesome. A lot of these are very, very nitpicky things. If I watch this play through, there's very, very little of that I even see when it's playing through. It's just, you were asking about taking things to, taking things to the next level. I think a lot of that is just frame by framing, whether it's mouth shapes, whether it's tracking your arcs in the hips, whether it's making sure that the whole body isn't moving together, and that there aren't any places that you could add some offsets, or that there aren't places where there's a certain body part that's floating or like much slower than the rest of it. And then making sure that even though this is super cartoony and it's super fun, that there's places to look for, in shots going forward. There's always places to look for genuine moments of intent in the acting. And you asked about taking what's important from the reference, and I think so much of that is what we naturally do when we're having a dialogue. And this is different because it's cartoony and it's pantomimey, and I think it's intentionally. I think you intended it to be that way. But in terms of what recruiters would look for or what the industry looks for, having something on your reel that's also like a very genuine acting piece is a good counterpart to something like this. And really, like, once you get to this level of polish that you're at here, just framing through it to look for arcs, look for things where body mechanics might not be quite right, even though it's cartoony. And just little places to improve. Any in betweens that might not be quite as strong, that you can favor towards one key or another key if they're foreshortened to camera. You have lots of like great bend in the arms and all these smear frames, and just make sure that when you have when you're transitioning from like a bent pose to an angular pose, make sure that you're able to kind of hide that in the movement rather than seeing the transition happen, where we could still use some of those nice curves in the shapes and things like that. So I think this looks really awesome. I think it's such a cool piece of animation. I think you have really fun ideas in it. I love this thing that you're doing like that. I think stuff like that where not everyone would necessarily think about it think to do it that way is what helps set you apart. And since you're asking about, me and my experience in the industry and, how I would look back on early days, I would just say, like, you always have stuff that sets you apart, and your ideas and your acting and what you see for your characters, all of that stuff is what sets you apart, and finding those genuine moments like that. And then in terms of plussing your animation, it's just nitty gritty polished stuff, and you're already doing so well with all of that. So keep going, and thank you again so much for submitting this animation. It's so fun to watch, and I think you've done such a great job with it. So if you want to dig back into it, I'd love to see it again, and it just looks great. So keep going. Thanks.